Hi everyone, I'm Mike and welcome to this week's Animal Alphabet Challenge. So over the past few weeks we've been doing some Sharpie sketches, fairly limited time frames, different animals, and this week is episode H. So what I'm going to do today is do a drawing of a heron in flight, and as usual I've taken the reference photograph from Pixabay, which is the royalty-free website for photographs of all different subjects. Now, in general, over the past few weeks, I've been allowing myself around about 5 minutes to do each of these sketches, and that's kind of part of the idea of the project, is to use simple materials, so just the Sharpie pen and A4 mixed media paper, but also to give myself a limited time frame to just get something done quickly, basically. And then the key thing is I'm exploring subjects that I don't normally draw. However, this week I'm giving myself a little bit longer, so this video is about 10 minutes long as opposed to the usual 5, just because the heron, especially in this particular pose, is a little bit more complex, so I just found it took a bit longer to do. There's also another thing a little bit unusual about this particular subject. The other subjects so far in the series, I didn't really have any kind of inkling that I was going to draw them. I just came across them at random. I haven't been longing to draw those things or anything like that, so I just picked subjects at random. But the heron is something I've been kind of interested in drawing for a little bit, because about a year ago I was down by the river in Exeter, the River Exe, and there was a heron. Well, actually I think it was probably an aigrette, and I tried to get some reference photos. I'll pop the footage up on screen a minute. As you can see, I've just done the outline of the current drawing. So I'll put the footage up now, and I was hoping to kind of get footage of this beautiful white bird, to do a painting, but I couldn't get close enough. My camera didn't have a strong enough zoom, and so it flew away pretty quickly as well. So that was about a year ago. So just going back to the current drawing, as you can see, just very loose, light, sketchy lines. Quite a complex pose we've got going on here. So I'm being a little more tentative than I am sometimes. I'm just putting in the legs here, but just taking a fairly gentle, loose treatment to get the outline in. But back to the story. But then the other month, I was at the mill on the Exe. And some of you may remember this from a video a few months ago where I did an outdoor watercolour painting of the water flowing over the weir. I'll pop that up on screen a second. But more recently, on a lovely sunny day, I saw another bird, which I at first thought was a heron, but having looked these things up, I think it was also an aigrette. It's just a white bird. Looks very similar to a heron in terms of its body shape and head shape and everything. And as you can see, I'll put a little bit of footage up on screen now. As you can see, I managed to get a little bit closer, but I'm still not sure the footage is good enough for a painting. We'll see. So anyway, coming back to today's video, I was quite pleased to find when I got to letter H in the alphabet, because of those 2 river trips, quite pleased to find that Pixabay had some herons that I could use royalty-free, and obviously that's what I'm working on now. Having got the line work done, you can see that I've added some dark shadow to the more distant wing. And what I'm doing now is I'm just picking out key parts of the texture. So in other words, the most prominent or the largest visible feathers, really. So got those kind of spiky ended ones on the midriff there, and now I'm moving up into the wing in the foreground, and I've just added a little bit of line work there, and on top of that I'm just putting in a set of more or less parallel lines to convey some texture and also some shading. So one of the key techniques we can use when we're using a marker pen is hatching, or as I'm doing now, cross-hatching. So that's where you put down a series of parallel lines, and obviously the closer those lines are together, the darker the tone you'll create. The further apart they are, the lighter the tone, and that's simply hatching. And then if you run a second set of parallel lines well, it could be at 90 degrees, but at least at an angle to the first, then that's known as cross-hatching. You can obviously build up layers of tone there. So even when your mark maker has a relatively limited range, so for example it's much easier to be expressive, I think, with a brush which has a random element to it, and you can get a lot of different effects. But even something which we normally think of as being digital, in the sense that you either put down a black mark or you don't, even then we can be really quite expressive, with something which we think of, generally speaking, is just for labelling items or writing. So that's one of the reasons I really enjoy using the Sharpie marker. Now the heron and the egret actually have this wonderful little tuft coming up off the top of the head, so I've just indicated that with a couple of lines. And having loosely put some tone in on the body, I've now gone onto the head to just try and capture a little bit of an expression with the eye, and got to be careful not to overwork this area too much. You may remember in last week's gerbil drawing I overworked one of the eyes, I felt. And the drawing was okay, but I wish I hadn't done that with the eye. But that's a little learning experience for me. So I'm trying to be a little looser and a little lighter with the heron here, and so far pretty happy with the head and the neck. And sometimes, what appear to be, quite simple drawings, I think, can be, some of the most powerful. Sometimes it can just be, a few lines or a few patches of tone can give you quite a dramatic effect. I'll try and put a couple of examples up on the screen for you. For example, this stag is a relatively simple arrangement of just a few tones, and let me find another one for you in a second. You can see while we're waiting for that to pop up, I'm putting in some dark edges onto the upper wing of our heron. And then this is a little sheep, which I quite like. Again, just a few, 3 or 4 simple tones, but I think it's reasonably effective. So in my experience, complexity is not always the best way to an effective image. Sometimes it's best to keep things simple. So the sketch I'm doing today is a little bit of a contrast to that simplistic approach. You can see I'm taking quite a relatively complicated approach in that I'm putting in quite a wide variety of mark making styles, quite a wide variety of textures, and quite a wide range of tones. But as I said at the start of the video, for this particular subject, I don't know that I went in with a plan, but as I was going along, I just kind of felt it was necessary to do that. So what I'm doing here is, having blocked in general areas of tone, I'm now going over those areas and selectively darkening parts of that tonal region, but keeping other areas exposed with just the initial line work underneath, and then going somewhere in between with a mid-tone, which is what I'm doing now as well. But always keeping in mind the direction that the feathers are falling and the structure of the wing. So we're always trying to keep in mind 2 or 3 things. We're not simply colouring in. We're keeping in mind texture and contours and shadow and tone, and well, that's at least 4 things, isn't it? So, and try to stay fairly loose as well, but equally we don't want to overwork the subject or overwork the drawing either. Going back to that simplicity point. So at this stage I felt I needed to darken the shadow under that more distant wing. So that's something that happens because I've darkened the nearer wing. Now, having done that, I have to darken the wing in the distance to make it sit correctly and comfortably next to the other wing. And of course, that distant wing is more in shadow as well. So we need a real sort of dark, almost silhouette region there. But the heron drawing is coming together. I'm quite pleased with the sense of movement with this one, and I like the fact that I haven't been able to fit the feet in on the edge of the paper, so that gives a sense that the heron is kind of flying in from right to left. So I've put my signature there, bottom left, but before we finish I'm just going to add a few little touches here and there. So refining the tips rather of that nearer wing, just bringing them a little more into focus, putting on some really quite bold dark marks there. Then what else do we need to do? Maybe just a few little flourishes at the end of that other wing. And there's the finished drawing. So that's episode 8 of the Animal Alphabet Challenge done, and I hope to see you next week for episode I. Thanks very much for watching.